Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump arrives in Japan, meeting Emperor Naruhito. Trump discussed the China deal, a possible meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and many other topics aboard Air Force One. A Navy helicopter and a jet go down in the South China Sea within 30 minutes of each other. What we know about the crashes as authorities investigate. Flights are delayed across the country as airports feel the effects of the government shutdown, and the Department of Agriculture says 41 million Americans could lose SNAP benefits. A special session in Indiana will seek to redraw the state's congressional map. Will it succeed amid national fights over redistricting?
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Monday, October 27th. I'm Stephanie Cox. President Trump received a royal welcome by Japan's Emperor Naruhito today. The president arrived at the Imperial Palace shortly after touching down in Tokyo, the second stop of his Asia tour. Trump was the first foreign leader to meet Naruhito after he came to the throne in 2019, continuing an imperial line that some say is the world's oldest hereditary monarchy. Trump will also meet with Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi for the first time. It's a critical meeting for Takaichi, who wants to calm trade tensions. Trump has long complained that American cars have been shut out of Japanese markets. So Japan's government has floated the idea of buying a fleet of Ford F-150 trucks for road and infrastructure inspections. President Trump discussed a variety of topics aboard Air Force One on the way to Japan.
You guys have a very interesting couple of days. We have Japan, and then we have South Korea, but we have China coming, and it's going to be very interesting. I have a lot of respect for President Xi, and we are going to, I think we're going to come away with a deal, but I really feel good. Our country is doing so well economically. It's doing so incredibly well.
Are you planning to sign the final deal on TikTok on Thursday when you meet?
We might. That'll be one of the things we're discussing. Somebody reported it's been approved recently. I mean, we got an original approval from President Xi. I expect we'll have an approval, but I'd rather wait till a couple of days to let you know. I haven't mentioned it. I haven't said anything, but I'd love to meet with him if he'd like to meet. I got along great with Kim Jong-un. I liked him. He liked me. If he wants to meet, I'll be in South Korea. I just had a good relationship with him. I would love to see him if he wants to, if he even gets this message.
Wall Street reacted positively after Trump said he expects to reach a trade deal with China. S&P 500 futures jumped nearly 1%, while NASDAQ futures climbed 1.3%. Trump said he was open to extending his Asia trip to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, as you just heard. Meanwhile, South Korean officials were skeptical of such a meeting. The president also commented on highly skilled foreign workers needed by some factories. Trump says they will be brought into the U.S. in some instances, such as training factory workers to operate complex machinery. Trump also discussed Russian missiles aboard Air Force One.
Russia said this week that they tested a new missile that can go more than 8,000 miles. Is that saber rattling for you? What is that?
They know we have a nuclear submarine, the greatest in the world, right off their shore. So, I mean, it doesn't have to go 8,000 miles. And they're not playing games with us. We're not playing games with them either.
Putin said yesterday Russia had successfully tested a nuclear-powered cruise missile. Moscow says it can pierce any defense shield, adding that the missile flew over 8,000 miles. Trump said today that Putin should end the war in Ukraine instead of testing a nuclear-powered missile. The president also said he recently had an MRI done and that the results were perfect. The United States and China have agreed on a framework for a new trade deal, marking a potential breakthrough in one of the world's most consequential economic relationships. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and other key trade developments from President Trump's trip to Asia.
President Trump says he's confident of hashing out a deal with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping when they meet in the coming days. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jameson Greer met with top Chinese officials on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. Here's Bessent on NBC News yesterday.
We've created a framework for the two leaders to discuss on Thursday in Korea.
Bessent says the upcoming talks will go beyond trade, touching on broader international issues as well.
I think that they will also be discussing President Trump's global peace plan that he's been so successful at, both here in Asia, the Middle East, and now he's looking to Ukraine, Russia.
Both sides are looking to avert an escalation of their trade war after Trump threatened new 100% tariffs on Chinese goods and other trade curbs starting on November 1st. That was in retaliation for China's expanded export controls on rare earth magnets and minerals. Bessent called the 100% tariffs Trump threatened China with old news.
I think we will be able to discuss them helping us get this terrible fentanyl crisis under control. I think we are going to be able to discuss substantial soybean and ag purchases for our American farmers. I think we are going to be able to discuss more balanced trade.
Meanwhile, a group of Chinese H-6K bombers recently flew near Taiwan to practice what the Chinese called confrontation drills. Chinese state media reported the move yesterday, publicizing the action just a few days before Trump is due to meet Xi in South Korea. The HSK is a strategic bomber that can carry nuclear weapons. Taiwan's defense ministry denounced the report as a propaganda ploy aimed at intimidation. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thanks, Daniel, for that report. 2 U.S. Navy aircraft went down in the South China Sea yesterday. The 2 crashes came within an hour of each other. First, a Seahawk helicopter crashed at 2:45 p.m. local time. Officials from the U.S. Pacific Fleet say it was conducting routine operations. About 30 minutes later, officials said a Super Hornet fighter jet from the same carrier also went down. All 5 crew members in both accidents, 3 from the helicopter and 2 on board the fighter jet, were recovered safely. The crashes are under investigation and no further details about possible causes have been released as of yet. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, President Trump said the crashes could have been caused by what he called bad fuel. He ruled out foul play and said there was nothing to hide. And President Trump said today he would rule out running for the vice presidency in 2028 in the federal election. Trump said he would be allowed to do that, but he didn't think the people would like it. He called it too cute. The president praised Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance as potential future Republican candidates. According to the 22nd Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, no one may be elected to the U.S. presidency a third time. Some have suggested that one way around this prohibition would be for Trump to stand as vice president, while another candidate stood for president and resigned, letting Trump again assume the presidency. Opponents have disputed whether this would be legal. And former Vice President Kamala Harris is hinting she may run for president again. Her comments aired in an interview yesterday. Speaking with the BBC, Harris said, quote, "I am not done." It marked her clearest indication yet that she might launch another presidential campaign in 2028 following her 2024 defeat to President Trump. While Harris said she has not made a final decision, she still views herself as an active player in politics. On a CBS News Sunday morning interview that aired yesterday, California Governor Gavin Newsom confirmed he's considering a 2028 presidential run. Newsom said he currently has no idea if he will enter the race and that he'll make a decision about that after the 2026 midterm elections conclude. Newsom's term as governor ends in January 2027, and he's unable to seek re-election due to term limits. He's already visited several early primary states, including South Carolina, in an early sign he may be testing the interest of voters. And President Trump said a decision on the next Federal Reserve chair might be made by the end of the year. And speaking on Air Force One this morning, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the pool of candidates has been narrowed to 5. These include Trump aide Kevin Hassett and BlackRock executive Rick Ryder. The president said he's also thinking about Bessent himself as a candidate, and he mentioned Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Indiana Governor Mike Braun today called for state lawmakers to return for a special session. They'll be redrawing the state's congressional map amid a national fight over redistricting. The effort is intended to give the Republican Party an easier path to maintain control of the House in the 2026 midterms. Indiana lawmakers will convene on November 3rd, but it's unclear if enough of the GOP majority Senate will back new maps. And opponents are expected to challenge any new maps in court. President Trump has called on Republican states to redraw maps. The White House has held multiple meetings with Indiana lawmakers in recent months. Republicans in Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina have moved quickly to enact new districts, and California Democrats are seeking to counter with their own redistricting plan. Welcome back. In a recent survey by the Epoch Times, its readers were asked about their stance on free markets and their application in big cities. We're bringing in next Epoch Times reporter Lawrence Wilson for insights. Just tell us more about who's been interviewed here in this Epoch Times survey and what you found from a broad level.
Yeah, these surveys, which we do every week, are surveys distributed through our social media and our email list. So it goes primarily to Epoch Times readers. So those are the folks responding. It's not like a Gallup poll, which seeks to find every demographic in the country. We're surveying Epoch readers. And what we found out is that they overwhelmingly favor free market solutions to the nation's problems over collectivism. As an example, 98%, nearly everybody said that promoting innovation and growth is best done by the free market versus collective solutions. Other opinions along that lines, 97% said that America's long-term prosperity is better served by having market freedom than expanding state control over the economy. So a clear bias in favor of capitalism among Epoch readers.
And it's noted here because the front runner in the New York City mayor election is a self-described socialist Democrat, Zoran Mamdani. We've all been watching that race for mayor. How do people see that race's significance on a national level?
Well, they definitely agree, most readers, that it is significant. 88%, that's pretty high, said that it does have significance in illuminating this national debate about market versus state solutions. And about 78% thought that individual responsibility versus collective provision of resources would probably shape the future of America's cities. So this seems to be an important topic, and our readers are cued into that. Now, here's the interesting part. When asked if they thought that this meant that we're seeing a change in how young Americans see affordability and stability in our economy, opinions were less strong. Still about 2/3 agreed, but only 32% agreed, or 33% agreed strongly. So there was a little fall off there in whether this means Americans are beginning to think different about things like fairness and success and so on.
Fascinating. And when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of governing, the survey did ask what governing priorities cities should have. What did you find there?
Well, a real simple answer emerged. Focus on crime reduction and make real change. So 95% agreed that governments are better off focusing on issues like crime than on economic and social policy. And very clear majority, 92%, said that federal funding for big cities ought to be tied to clear outcomes in various areas, including with independent audits, that focusing on things like cost and quality and efficiency. Interestingly, they didn't think so much that should be the case with housing, transit, and public safety. Only about half said that those areas should be tied to auditable, clear results.
And what did people say about how policy aims should be met? as in through more collectivist or more capitalist means?
Well, not too surprisingly, given what we've already seen from this survey, they thought the bottom line is do not expand public ownership of things like utilities, housing, transit, and not surprisingly, 80% said don't raise taxes. But only a little less than half thought it was possible to both preserve market freedoms and to expand social supports in our highest cost cities. So maybe a little bit of head scratching among our poll respondents about how we would actually accomplish both of those two things at the same time.
Final thoughts now, as one who is studying humankind and politics here in the U.S. in an ongoing way. What are your thoughts in studying all of these results?
Well, I think that there is clearly in some places in our country and among some folks, there is a rising feeling that more collectivist solutions are needed. And we see that in the polling in the Mondami race. He has been double digits ahead in that race since early in the summer. So there are a large group of people who say some of these solutions that we've tried just aren't working. It's time to try something else. But I think clearly the bulk of our readers are saying, no, we need to make some tweaks maybe, but we need to do that by allowing innovation and favoring personal responsibility.
Good to hear your thoughts there. Thank you so much, Lawrence Wilson with the Epoch Times.
My pleasure.
And we turn now to Capitol Hill, where the government shutdown is now in its 27th day. Pressure's growing on Congress to reach a deal as the deadlock disrupts air travel and threatens food assistance. Here are the details on that.
Answer any questions that you might have.
Airports from Los Angeles to Newark were hit with long delays yesterday as a shortage of air traffic controllers slowed flights nationwide. At Los Angeles International Airport, a 2-hour ground stop was issued because of staffing problems in Oakland. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says he expects more disruptions as the shutdown forces controllers to work without pay. Duffy told Fox News the pressure is mounting as more controllers call in sick amid growing financial strain. Trump administration officials say Democrats in the Senate are to blame for the shutdown and its economic fallout. A Republican-backed stopgap failed to make it out of the Senate last week, with the majority of Democrats voting against the bill. It was the 12th time a Senate vote on the plan failed. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told ABC News it's causing embarrassment on the world stage.
It's a global embarrassment what these Democratic senators are doing, keeping the government shut down.
Democrats are pushing back. They say Republicans need to consider their health care proposals, including addressing Affordable Care Act tax subsidies set to expire at the end of the year. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called on House Speaker Mike Johnson to get Republicans back to Congress.
Our view as Democrats is that we want to sit down with anyone, anytime, any place, either at the Capitol or back at the White House, to reopen the government, to enact a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people, while at the same time decisively addressing the Republican healthcare crisis that is crushing the American people.
The shutdown is now the second longest in U.S. history, and its effects are spreading far beyond the airports. The Department of Agriculture says 41 million Americans could lose their food stamps next month if Congress doesn't act to reopen the government. The agency says emergency funds can't be used for regular SNAP benefits once federal money runs out. Democrats have criticized the administration's handling of food assistance funding. They say officials should release contingency funds that were previously allocated to support low-income families. With flights grounded and families bracing for lost benefits, lawmakers remain deadlocked, with no clear path to end the shutdown or its growing fallout.
And the Senate will reconvene this afternoon, but another vote on the short-term funding bill is not on the schedule after failing for the 12th time last week. The House remains out of session this week. And Australia's competition regulators suing Microsoft. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission accuses the tech giant of misleading millions of customers into paying higher prices.
We are definitely seeking, as one of our orders, that the customers and subscribers receive redress and are compensated. So that is one of the orders we're seeking, and yes, we're seeking penalties.
The Commission alleges that the company misled 2.7 million customers by suggesting they had to bundle its Microsoft 365 software with artificial intelligence tool Copilot. After the integration of Copilot, the annual subscription price of the Microsoft 365 personal plan increased by 45%. The Commission said the price of the family plan increased by 29%. The regulator said Microsoft failed to clearly tell users that a cheaper classic plan without Copilot was still available. And Argentina's President Javier Milei celebrates after his party's decisive victory in the country's midterm elections. What he says it means for his agenda and why the Trump administration is watching closely. I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. In Argentina, President Javier Milei's party is set to win a decisive victory in the midterm elections. In a victory speech, Milei hailed the win as a historic turning point for the nation.
¡Viva la libertad, carajo! Hoy
Today has clearly been a historic day for Argentina. The Argentine people have decided to leave behind 100 years of decline and persevere on the path to freedom, progress, and growth. Today, we have passed a turning point. Today marks the beginning of building a great Argentina.
It's Milei's first major electoral test since taking office in 2023. Local media reported the party captured more than 40% of the national vote. Observers say the elections were a referendum on Milei's so-called shock therapy reforms aimed at slashing state spending and bureaucracy. Milei promised to put in place changes that would, quote, make Argentina great again. President Trump congratulated Milei on his victory, saying on Truth Social his administration's confidence in him was justified by the people of Argentina. Trump recently provided Argentina with a hefty financial rescue package, but had threatened to pull away if Milei did not do well. And a U.S. Navy destroyer has arrived in Trinidad and Tobago for joint military exercises as tensions escalate between the United States and Venezuela. The guided missile destroyer docked in Port of Spain yesterday. It will remain there until October 30th, while U.S. Marines train with Trinidad's defense forces. The U.S. Embassy says the drills aim to strengthen cooperation against transnational crime and enhance regional security. Venezuela's socialist government has denounced the exercises as a serious threat. The ship will provide support for counter-narcotics operations. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney will meet Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping later this week. Carney says he's also ready to sit down for trade talks with Trump as soon as the president is prepared to do so. Here's Carney.
I do expect there are plans for me and President Xi to meet. We will pick up on the discussions I had with Premier Li in New York a few weeks ago, a broad range of issues. Look, the president knows that I'm available to speak to the president, as I always would be, as you would expect. As president of the United States, so of course, make myself available and make myself available for other world leaders as they wish to.
Last Thursday, Trump announced he was cutting off trade talks with Canada. The move came after an Ontario political ad that argued that tariffs caused trade wars and economic disaster. The White House says the ad mischaracterized the words of former President Ronald Reagan. The Ronald Reagan Foundation agreed. Trump also announced an additional 10% tariff on goods from Canada Saturday. Carney has said he has not been in contact with Trump since Thursday, but has let him know he is available. Trump said he did not intend to meet with Carney on his Asian trip. And Brazilian President Lula da Silva said today that he's confident his country and the United States will reach a trade deal. President Trump said he had a good meeting with the Brazilian leader. The two met at the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. However, uncertainty around an agreement remains. The Trump administration imposed a 40% tariff on Brazilian products in July, on top of an earlier 10% tariff hike. Trump justified the tariff, saying the criminal prosecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro made for an economic emergency. And Afghan and Pakistani officials will meet in Istanbul today for a third day of talks after a recent series of border clashes. President Trump has offered to mediate. The dispute began after Pakistan conducted an airstrike this month on Kabul. The strike on the Afghan capital targeted the head of the Pakistani Taliban, a terrorist group separate from the Taliban that rules Afghanistan. The Taliban responded with attacks on Pakistani military posts along the length of the 1,600-mile border. And Mexico says the U.S. is extending the deadline to reach a trade deal by several weeks. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke to President Trump Saturday. Sheinbaum said today the two leaders agreed to extend talks and give the countries more time to reach a deal on non-tariff trade barriers. The United States' fentanyl-related tariffs to all Mexican goods that don't comply with the trade agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada could increase to 30% from 25% next week. That's after a 90-day pause on the enforcement of higher duties expires on Wednesday. Next, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the country would determine which foreign forces it would allow as part of a planned international force in Gaza. Here's Netanyahu speaking at a cabinet meeting over the weekend.
We control our own security, and we have made clear that in regard to international forces, Israel will determine which forces are unacceptable to us, and that is how we act and will continue to act. This is of course accepted by the United States as well, and its most senior representatives made clear in recent days. Israel is an independent state. We will defend ourselves by ourselves, and we will continue to control our fate.
It remains unclear whether Arab and other states will be ready to commit troops. That's in part given the refusal of Hamas to disarm, while Israel has voiced concerns about the makeup of the force. The Trump administration has ruled out sending U.S. soldiers into the Gaza Strip, but says it has spoken to multiple countries about contributing to the force. Last week, Netanyahu hinted that he would be opposed to any role for Turkish security forces in Gaza. Once warm Turkish-Israeli relations soured drastically during the Gaza war. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke about the international force during his visit to Israel on Friday.
There's a lot of countries that are offered to do it. Obviously, as you put together this force, it'll have to be people that Israel's comfortable, or countries that Israel's comfortable with as well. Let me just say that I think there are a lot of countries that are expressing interest right now.
Rubio added that Gaza's future governance still needed to be worked out among Israel and partner nations, but could not include Hamas. A major challenge to Trump's peace plan is that Hamas has not committed to disarming. Since the ceasefire began, Hamas has waged a violent crackdown on clans that have tested its grip on power. At the same time, the remains of 13 deceased hostages remain in Gaza, with Hamas citing obstacles to locating them.
We know Hamas can return them.
However, an Israeli government spokesperson said on Sunday Hamas knew where the bodies were. Israel allowed the entry of an Egyptian technical team to work with the Red Cross to locate the remains. On Sunday, they met with Hamas to search beyond the yellow line, demarcating the Israeli military's pullback in the Gaza Strip.
More on the Middle East, and what's coming out of there is Secretary of State Marco Rubio today discussing an Israeli strike on Gaza. Rubio said Washington does not view the targeting of a member of a Palestinian terrorist group as a violation of a U.S.-backed ceasefire. Israel said it struck a member of the Islamic Jihad terror group on Saturday. It accused the individual of planning to attack Israeli troops. Islamic Jihad denied it was planning an attack. Rubio says Israel has not surrendered its right to self-defense as part of the peace agreement. The Secretary of State says Jerusalem can respond to imminent threats. Rubio said the ceasefire in Gaza was based on obligations on both sides, repeating that Hamas must quickly return the remains of hostages who died in captivity.